So as you start to spend some more money on watches, one of the details that you'll notice gets mentioned more and more is the concept of finishing. It's a loaded term, but today we're going to be looking at some of the best finished watches for under $10,000. Specifically, we're going to be looking more from $5,000 to $10,000 because we have a whole video looking at the best finished watches under $5,000, which we can link to in the description down below after watching this one. If you're interested, check it out. As I mentioned, finishing is a word that gets thrown around a lot. So how I would classify finishing in my own words would be any decorative technique done to cases, movements, dials, and other additional dial parts. As you extend up in price, movement finishing is really going to be the most discussed about element of finishing overall. But for this $5,000 to $10,000 price tier, you're going to see a lot of different elements of finishing that can allow a watch to separate itself. And before we jump in, I do want to make an announcement and really just kind of one final reminder, probably going to only keep this open for a very short period after making this known here. We have a $5,000 watch shopping spree giveaway going on currently on TeddyBaldassarre.com. So if you are a viewer of this channel and you want to participate in this, all you have to do is head to the link in the description down below where you're going to fill out a form. On that form, we're going to ask you to submit the watches you would pick if you were picked to be the winner. You do not have to fill up all those fields, just paste the links though from our website. They have to be links from our website for the watches that you would choose. Following your submission, you will get an email to your email address where you'll have to verify your email. Each individual is only eligible for one entry, and this giveaway is available to US participants only this time. The winner will be announced in late February of 2024, so right around the corner here. We'll make a public announcement on our social channels. You'll also be contacted if you do win by an @TeddyBaldassarre.com email address. Please do not fall for any tricks, scams out there around this giveaway. I see things in the comments all the time that are just fake. Do not fall for them. We will contact you from a verified source. Also, we'll never ask for your bank or credit card information if you do win this giveaway. So please be safe out there. But best of luck to all that participate. So as mentioned, $5,000 to $10,000, we are going to be looking at a variety of different watches and styles. The first watch here is the NOMOS Zurich. Now NOMOS, in terms of their design, is not going to be for everybody, but one element of NOMOS that I think is so overlooked and underappreciated is their ability as a manufacturer. Many people do not realize that NOMOS is producing over 95% of the watch that you are getting on your wrist in Glashütte. Like, this is a watch that is manufactured more in-house than a lot of major players in the industry. And NOMOS has only been around since 1990. So to develop these levels of manufacturing capabilities in this short period, at least relatively speaking for the watch industry, is impressive. Now this watch I wanted to feature here because of the movement. That is really where I'm drawing attention to here. I think the DUW calibers from NOMOS are beautiful and some of the best in class for this price range. We have the 5201. This has their own escapement system that they are developing in-house known as the swing system. But calling into detail some of the finished elements, you have a skeletonized rotor, perlage across the base plate, Glashütte striping, tempered blued screws, so those are going to be heat blued screws to get that color and hardness and resistance to corrosion. You'll also notice the ratchet wheel will have the snailing on it. When I was visiting NOMOS, the cool element about this whole process of finishing that smaller component is that there are only 2 people in the company, or a very small amount of people in the company, that can actually do this surface finish. And every NOMOS watch that has this finishing technique will go through the same hands. This is the type of stuff that really resonates with me and I think allows a brand to really separate itself, but very well done movements. I think also from a complication type in this segment, having some level of world time functionality for a watch right around the $6,000 price range with a manufacturer caliber movement that looks like this is definitely some great value. So I have 2 Rolex watches on this list because to have a video about this subject in this price range and to not mention Rolex would just feel not right. And I do have 2 watches here that I think are probably among the best and also under $10,000 retail price. We can argue all day whether or not we should include them in here, but people are getting these at retail despite them being harder than other brands on this list to get. The first watch is the Rolex Submariner. This is the 124060 Submariner, no date here, classic design, symmetry, all there. This is one of the most iconic watches of all time and follows roots that are hard to rival in the broader watch industry. Now, where I'm going to call attention to for Rolex and where they excel the most is with their cases as well as their dial details. Those are the two places where Rolex, I think if you're speaking about finishing, is where they excel. You're not going to talk about their movement finishing. For one, you can't see it in both of these watches, and two, I would say they're, for the price, nothing incredibly special, at least from their finishing. I think the bezel on Rolex Submariners are some of the best that you're going to have in the entire industry. The notching and the cutting on those different points so you can get a grip are going to be among the best. Very easy to get activated. You also have this very crisp inlay for those markings on that bezel for easy legibility and just sharp in their ability to be able to be seen at a quick glance. The crown and crown guards are sculpted precisely and they look great upon closer inspection. This is what I would call attention to. And the other Rolex watch I wanted to include is the Rolex Datejust. This is the 126234, 36 millimeter. And obviously when you're talking about a Datejust, yes, you see it everywhere. This is a watch that has become one of the first buys for so many people when they're getting into Rolex. It's a classic design, been around since the 1940s. Where I would call attention to here and where this watch excels, yes, all of those dial details, the same thing could be said here for how they are done that we mentioned with the Submariner, but I'll just even go further with the bracelet. The Jubilee bracelet, it's among one of the most wearable, well-finished bracelets in its price segment. It looks great. Its reflective nature, the mixing of polishing and brushing on it, it's just a beautiful thing to look at, and it's going to have really tight tolerances. In addition, I will call attention to the fluted bezel. I don't think there is another fluted bezel in the industry that rivals that of Rolex. It's very hard to beat. I think just the way that they have this reflective nature to them, how sharp those edges are, and how it just works with the design overall with the Jubilee bracelet. It truly is a timeless design. Now we move right along to a German brand again, and we're gonna look at Glashütte Original. I'm not going to be able to mention their CQ because the CQ, yes, it's well finished, but it's just over $10,000 on a bracelet. And then the Panamatic Lunar, same deal. It's just over. You can maybe make the exception, but there's a watch from them that is actually closer to $6,000, and you're still getting a movement with a lot of amazing technique and finish that I think allows it to separate from almost any other movement at this price category from $6,000 to $7,000. This is the Glashütte Original 60s. Now on the front of the watch and the case, this is an inoffensive look and feel, classic 1960s design that you'll see in other places across the industry, but they were really one of the pioneers of this design style. But then when you flip it over, you see this movement. I think it's one of the best finished movements in watchmaking for under $7,000. So you have Glashütte stripes across the bridges, you have a swan neck regulator that is polished independently, sunray finish on the movement outskirts, polished screw heads, beveling on many of the edges you'll see throughout this movement, and then also snailing finish on the reduction wheel, and then a skeletonized rotor with a 21 karat gold, not 18 karat gold, 21 karat gold weight. Is this caliber going to be on the same level of that of, say, a Panamatic Lunar? No, because you're not getting that hand engraving on the balance bridge, but it is still a great looking movement, and it's a crazy surprise when you flip this watch around for the first time, when you see that simple, non-offensive dial, and then you see this movement. And this is another brand that I don't think enough people recognize. If you want to get a sense of what it takes to produce a movement like this, I would check out my video where I visited Glashütte Original. I came away from that walkthrough with so much more respect for that brand, and I think if you watch that video, you'll probably have the same feeling that I did when I was able to walk through those hallways. So the unfortunate reality for JLC watches in the past couple of years is the prices have gone up quite a bit. There are not many JLC watches that are going to fall underneath $10,000. This is a true manufacturing brand though. They're producing watches and many of their cases, like the Reverso cases, in-house. And when we're talking about calibers, that's a whole different animal. Well over 1,000 calibers in their history, which is remarkable for a brand producing watches in the Valley de Joux to this day. Here we have one of the few watches under $10,000, and although it's not a world beater compared to some of the other pieces, it's still a phenomenal watch. This is the JLC Master Ultra Thin Date. Looking at the dial, I also think the applied faceted markings on this dial are well done. Among the best in the business, and they are cut to a very sharp degree. You also have the Dauphine hands with that center facet, look nice, reflective, work in tandem with those applied markers to really create a cohesive design language. But then you flip it around and you see this display case back where you get a solid looking movement, and this is the other area of finishing that I would say differentiates differentiates from others. And keeping in mind that this is around the same pricing that you're getting for a modern Rolex Submariner, no date. And in the process, getting some movement finishing that I would say is a step above. Perlage on the base plate, tempered blued screws throughout the movement, polished screw heads, Côte de Genève finish across the bridges. You're also going to see that Côte de Genève finish on the gold rotor, which is also skeletonized, and then it's going to have polished edges, which will have this reflective nature that allow it to even be more eye-catching outside of its color. Now we shift to a watch that is all about its case finishing. This is the Zenith DeFi Skyline. When you look at watches that have this integrated steel sports look, I would say in this tier you have this watch, but then you have to jump up a little bit more. This is when you get into the Chopard Alpine Eagle, you get into the Piaget Polos, you get into the Girard Perregaux with the Laureato. This is among that class of that kind of next tier up, right before you get into those mainstream high horology brands that we know the names of. But it comes at $9,000. And the case, I would argue, is among the best of all of those that were mentioned. I'm gonna try to show off some wrist rolls here for this watch because I think that will best demonstrate some of these features. You have a brush top on that bezel with polished sides, and I'll stress the sides here because there are a lot of different surface areas to hit in that polishing. The brushing on the bracelet is uniform. We also have polished points on the internal portions, the interior portions of those links, and along the outer edge. You have polished facets that run the length of the case. It's going to be very prominent, eye-catching. Case sides are also sculpted to have this angled break. They're not going to be a straight linear line all the way down the case side, which I think adds a little bit more visual interest. The dial is a bit more flat compared to the previous DeFi Classic, but still looks the part. And then the movement, again, kind of similar theme. It's going to have this matte effect, so it's not going to be decorated to the same degree that we'll see from some other watches on this list. However, I'm not going to get mad to look at this movement as well. Have that matte effect on the bridges, blued screws, and an ornate logo. So one of the leaders in this price segment for a brand is Grand Seiko. Grand Seiko, I could probably put 10 to 15 different watches that I think are deserving to be on a list like this. But I'm not going to do that because we're going to try to keep this video under 30 minutes if possible and want to show love to all these different brands. First watch though is one that I think shows it on all fronts. This is the Grand Seiko SBGA 413 and the 415. This is part of the Four Seasons collection, 62 GS case. A lot to call attention to here. We'll start with that case. So it has a titanium case. It offers Zuratsu polishing, this long faceted edge going across the case, and also how these lugs will slightly turn in as they meet that bracelet. I think even elevates and makes more noticeable that facet going along the side. I heard this facet that's running along the case is one of the harder techniques for the artisans that are doing these polishing, the Zuratsu polishing, to execute and perfect. And then nothing really needs to be said about this dial further. I mean, the dial detail here is among the best that you are going to see across the entire industry. I mean, look at the fine grain pattern. What Grand Seiko is doing is basically hand drawing and etching this detail, and then they're able to use this sophisticated process, which is, they don't really disclose, but it's somewhat of a hybridized pressing process where they're able to create this effect on some of these dials. So you get that hand molding to get this finish. So it's a process that nobody really knows, and they've not really shown anybody how they do it. Then also all the dial details. I would say where Grand Seiko doesn't get enough credit when it comes to their finishing are their dial details. Each one of those individual indices is going to be finished, faceted, look incredible up close. Then you have their hands, which are also going to work in unison with those markers. You also have the Applied GS logo. The framing on their date windows are also well done. And then in this case, the 9R65 is going to be slightly hidden from view. Not their best looking movement, but never going to get mad having to look at this. You have striping on the movement, beveling, polished screws, and then the rotor is well executed as well. Transitioning to a high beat watch here, we have the SBGH 295. I'm just gonna give this one an honorable mention. A lot of the same dial details that you're going to talk about, just a different texture as you look up close. And I'll try to get some ultra close macro shots on screen for you so you can just get a sense of what I'm talking about here. This is just an incredible looking dial. Whenever I post this on Instagram, people lose their minds because it's such a beautiful watch. I struggle to think of another watch under $7,000 where you're getting this level of detail on a dial. And then you have the case and movement all well finished to go along with it. The other watch, and this is a different element of Grand Seiko that I want to talk about, is actually a watch I have on my wrist here. This is the SLGH 005 White Birch. The star of the show here, and yes, the first thing that people are going to jump to is the white birch, so that birch tree effect. And for this version, it's even more exaggerated with the detail. So the cutting of that dial compared to the spring drive version is going to be more intense for the high beat. That's something that not everybody is aware of. It's not to a point where it's overly ostentatious. I wear this watch all the time. It was my most worn watch last year, and I love wearing it. But the real star of the show is the 9SA5 movement. This is a movement that I would argue is one of the best under $10,000 from a finishing standpoint. The bridge layout, I think, is beautiful. You'll have those two barrels that you'll see at the bottom side of the movement opposing that of the balance. The intermediate bridges, as well as all the other bridges, are going to have Côte de Genève finish on top of them. Then what they do is they mattify that Côte de Genève and that top surface to allow it to have more contrast with the anglage that are going to be on the bridges. That's something you typically don't see all the time in watches in this price tier, and I think this is among some of the best that you're going to find. You have a skeletonized and engraved rotor, engraved and polished screw heads. You have also polished sinks for the jewels. Micro perlage is on the base plate, you can see underneath the balance. Absolutely love this watch. The movement was really what sold me on this piece in general. There are other features of this watch that are definitely worthy of talking about and appreciating. I have a whole video on this watch, but the movement, not just how it looks, but also how it operates, was really what got me over the edge for this watch and why I wear it all the time. So a brand you typically don't see in this price range is Chopard, but here we have the Chopard LUC XP. This is a watch that is going to do most of the talking when you flip it around, but we'll talk quickly about some of the details on the front of the watch. The case is well done. I wouldn't call attention to much. You do have some detail with the brushing that's gonna have a clean pattern on the case side. The dial is distinct. Those numerals on the dial are going to be applied, and I think they do create some visual interest. That said, the movement is another story where you're really starting to see why this watch is on this list. I love the layout for the bridges here. They also have Côte de Genève on all of those bridges with some of the cleanest beveling that you are going to find in this price range. Look at how that angle is a bit more rounded compared to what you'll see elsewhere. You're gonna have that reflective surface. You shift this under the light, it's going to look beautiful. The other thing that we have to talk about is the micro rotor. This is one of the few micro rotor movements that I am aware of under $10,000, and it looks the part too, decorated on top. Then you have polished screw heads throughout the movement to add to its case even further. So Breitling is not a brand that I would just jump to think about their finishing necessarily, but they do have some standout watches. But the one I wanted to focus on is one that doesn't get talked about as much compared to others from the brand, and that is the Breitling Chronomat. This is the B01 version. 42 millimeters. You can get this in different case sizes though. The Chronomat is one of those watches that typically is polarizing because of its design style. It has grown on me a lot over the years, and a few places we can call attention to from a finishing standpoint and why I wanted to put it on this list. One has to be with the dial. Those applied markers look great, neatly faceted on the sides, hands sharply cut to go along with it. And then the crown and the crown guards, I find them exceptional. I mean, you're seeing this onion style crown with these cut ridges. Then you have those sloping sides to protect the crown as well as the pushers. A little bit more unconventional, but well done. Then you have the bullet bracelet, which is very difficult to manufacture, and each link is individually polished at their outer edge, which you can kind of see here. Then you also have those intermediate links, those interior links that are going to have some polishing as well, different parts of the bracelet. Then you also have the B01 caliber on the other side, which I find to be a very attractive movement for this price range. Column wheel with a decent amount of display, despite having a automatic winding mass and a vertical clutch. Now we want to shift into Omega. Omega obviously has some watches here. This is really where they play and dominate in the industry, like $5,000 to $10,000. You have so many different watches to choose from. One that has to be on this list because it's just under $6,000 is the Omega Seamaster Diver 300. Lots to call attention to with a piece like this. I would say this is really where you start to see that next tier, like the entry door into above $5,000. What can you get for a watch in this price range? It's $5,000 to $10,000 range, and what can I expect? If I had to pick one watch to help represent that and to introduce somebody to what you can get for this price range, this would be one of the watches that I would have on my short list. You have those aggressive turn design lugs with polishing. The bezel and the inlay indications are neatly done with easy legibility. The bracelet has polished intermediate links and a solid milled clasp. The hands and markers are among the best that we've seen thus far in this video, which this is the best of the best. Close examination, in my opinion, holds up very well. And then you also have that wave motif on the dial that presents a texture and a glossy reflective backdrop. Also, the reverse side is easy on the eyes. You have what appears to be this blasted perimeter around the exhibition case back. Then you have spiral waves across the bridges, polished screw heads. And in general, these 8800, 8900 movements, just attractive to look at. The next watch is one that I personally own. Love this watch. It's one of my most worn. This is the Omega Constellation Globemaster. Has an underrated feel, but I think it is among the best in this price range from Omega, in just my opinion. I'm a big fan of the Constellation family, what it represents, just both historically as well as in the contemporary collection. But this is my favorite Constellation family model. This is the Globemaster. First thing I will call attention to on this watch is going to be the bezel. We talked about fluted bezels earlier with Rolex, but this bezel is made of tungsten carbide. So the difficulty in creating a bezel with this look and reflective nature with a material that is that hard compared to a white gold or stainless steel, I mean, that is not even close. The hardness of this is well over 2,000 Vickers, which for context, stainless steel, 150, 200 Vickers on the hardness scale if it's untreated. So pretty incredible they're able to get that. Bracelet is well done, but more utilitarian because of the brush finish everywhere. The dial has three-dimensionality to it because of 2 points. You have the applied markers on the dial, which are going to have superluminova set within them that I find to look great up close. And then you have the pie pan dial. Flipping the watch around, same kind of detail here with that wave spiral pattern with the 8900 movement, but then at center you have this decorative medallion for that observatory chronometer case back, paying honor to the lineage of this design family in Omega's wins at the chronometer trials years ago. And why that observatory was there is because observatory chronometers were seen as the most accurate and one of the highest badges of honor for a movement and performance in watchmaking decades ago. And two other watches from Omega I'll include. One is just under $10,000. This is the Omega Aquaterra World Timer. A lot of the same elements remain. Markers are there, case is well finished, but the difference here is going to be the dial. You have a titanium plate at the center that is laser ablated to create this realistic view of the world. It has this three-dimensional effect that looks so real and vivid. The color contrasts beautifully with the rest of the dial, and you're getting that transition from blue to green, striking as can be, and on center stage at the center of the dial. And then the other watch that I want to mention is the Omega Speedmaster Professional. This is the moon watch. I am going to look at the sapphire sandwich version because I think that allows you to get a bit more view and detail of where this watch excels. Not to say that the Headlight version is not incredible. It's just that this one, if you're talking about displaying finish, probably does it better. The bracelet is phenomenal on this watch. I know there were some mixed feelings about transitioning to this kind of fine link look. I love this combination with the Speedmaster design. Also, the other reason why I like the sapphire sandwich version for the front of the watch is you get a little applied element with the Omega logo. It's a quick indication to tell the difference between the Headlight and the sapphire. The turn lug design with that facet running along the case and those lugs is one of the most recognizable features of this watch overall and synonymous with Speedmaster design in general. And then flipping the watch all around, now we have view of a 3861 movement on the backside of this watch, which I find to be probably one of the best finished and best looking chronograph movements for under $10,000, if not the best. It certainly benefits from being a lateral clutch and a manual wound caliber, so you're not having the oscillating weight get in the way of seeing all those beautiful details of this watch. You have Geneva waves across the bridges, you have beveled edges, polished screw heads, sinks for the jewels that are really reflective, you have engraving. Having this view on the back side of the watch is a great reminder of, maybe why you spent all this money in the first place. But all right, guys, that's all we have for this video, looking at some of the best watches, the best finished watches from $5,000 to $10,000. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. We're closing in on 1 million subscribers, so would appreciate any help in getting us there. Also, is there another watch that you would include in a list like this? Leave a comment down below and give some reasoning why you would include it in this list. Also, be sure to check out TeddyBaldassarre.com. TeddyBaldassarre.com, authorized dealer of over 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. Also, how we're able to fund all of our productions here is through selling watches. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd love to have your business. Allow us to keep doing what we're doing here, and we love what we do. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.